Our main story tonight concerns food. Whether you're a vegan, a carnivore, or somewhere in between, all of it is either ripped from its home or dies screaming. Food is fun! Specifically, we're going to talk about food safety. It is a vital component of public health, as demonstrated by this old PSA about a military base having to deal with an outbreak of salmonella.
At midnight, about 40 of us in the duty section got a light meal. It was just about this time that things were beginning to happen. It began like this. At first, a few of the men who weren't in the duty section got sick. And it got steadily worse. Vomiting, abdominal pains, and diarrhea. It was hard to tell which caused the most trouble.
Except it isn't, because diarrhea causes the most trouble. There's just no doubt about that. If you had to choose between those three symptoms, diarrhea is dead last every single time. Abdominal pains? Not fun, but also grow up. Sometimes your tummy hurts, that's life. Vomiting? Awful, but at least you can somewhat control the trajectory. It is possible to daintily vomit in public, but there is absolutely no way to retain any shred of dignity once you have shat yourself. It is game over. You can't come back from that. You're basically an animal. You live at the zoo now. Odds are you've probably experienced getting sick from food at some point in your life, because it happens a lot. Every year, an estimated 46 million Americans are sickened by foodborne illnesses. And of them, 128,000 are hospitalised and about 3,000 die. Now, obviously, it is in the public interest to try and prevent any of that from happening, which is why so often you'll turn on the TV and see stories like these.
Kraft Heinz has voluntarily recalled 7,000 cases of Taco Bell's salsa con queso mild cheese dip out of botulism concerns.
An expanded recall of peaches linked to a salmonella outbreak.
Several Jif peanut butter products are being pulled from the shelves.
Stores cannot sell this cereal legally because of this recall. So if you have the Honey Smacks in your pantry, please throw it out.
OK, so a couple of things there. On the first one, honestly, I'd always assumed that all Taco Bell jarred products could give you botulism. You want the spice, you roll the dice. Everyone understands that. And as for throw out your Honey Smacks, that's pretty good advice even when there's not a recall, because look at this shit. It looks like maggots glazed with sugar. And that's without getting into the mascot. Who is this? Cereal mascots are supposed to be charming, whether they're a cultural stereotype that this accent doesn't get to enjoy, or an inappropriately sexy tiger. But this is nothing. Why does your shirt say dig 'em? Dig what? The Honey Smacks? Absolutely not, you amphibian pervert. And look, when you see stories like those, you would assume that the government is constantly on the lookout for potentially dangerous food. But it's become increasingly clear that our food safety system, in particular the Food and Drug Administration, which oversees most of it, has some serious shortcomings. In 2016, an audit done by the agency itself found unacceptable delays in getting dangerous food off the shelves, finding that in 30 recalls, it took an average of 57 days from when the FDA was notified. And the author of that report acknowledged that was a big problem.
Unless you get all the product off the shelf, people still are at risk. If you were playing Russian roulette, you took all the bullets out of the gun and you put it to your head, there's no risk. But if there's still a couple of bullets left in there, you're still playing Russian roulette, aren't you?
Wow. That is an alarmingly apt metaphor for the current safety of our food supply. Although, real quick, if you are playing Russian roulette and you take all the bullets out of the gun, for what it's worth, you are no longer playing Russian roulette. You're in a community theatre production of The Seagull. I had to leave at intermission, but you were so good. And you might remember, the FDA's shortcomings were badly exposed last year when Abbott, a company that makes 40% of this country's baby formula, shut down its factory over serious safety violations. Violations that the FDA clearly should have acted on much sooner.
A sign of trouble came last September in a report to the FDA. An infant who became ill with a rare bacterial infection had consumed formula made at the Abbott plant. In October, an Abbott whistleblower sent FDA officials this 34-page document alleging that lax practices, including regulatory violations, were consistently overlooked. It wasn't until January 31st that the FDA sent a team to the Abbott facility to investigate. There, they found evidence of bacteria in the powdered infant formula environment that can be deadly to infants.
It's true, the FDA took 4 months from their first sign something was wrong to do a follow-up inspection. And at that point, at least 4 babies had been hospitalised and 2 died. Even an internal FDA report afterwards concluded that the agency had systemic vulnerabilities. And a much more scathing outside audit faulted them for lack of communication and engagement across the agency. But the truth is, scathing report finds fault with the FDA is just not a new story. It has happened again and again and again. You can find similar reports in 2010, 1991, and even this one from back in 1969.
The American consumer is surrounded by an arsenal of products which can kill or maim him, and the Food and Drug Administration has neither the money nor the authority to do much about it. That's the gist of a confidential report prepared by 7 senior members of the FDA.
That is Walter Cronkite flagging the state of the FDA as a serious problem half a century ago. And if something that he reported on is still an issue, you know you've got a problem. I'm just saying, if JFK was still regularly getting shot in Dallas, you'd really hope somebody would have done something about it by now. But given that we've known the way the FDA regulates food is some version of fucked for decades, tonight, let's talk about exactly why that is and why it's been so hard to fix. And let's start with the fact that despite the FDA standing for Food and Drug Administration, the two parts of that are not given remotely equal weight. Drugs are prioritised heavily. FDA commissioners almost always come from the medical side and have almost no experience with food issues. And apparently, it's a long-running joke among FDA officials that the F in FDA is silent. In fact, its own staff, including some FDA commissioners, have been known to slip up and call it the Federal Drug Administration. And come on, there's only 2 things to remember in the name: food and drugs. If you need a helpful mnemonic for it, just remember this simple phrase: food and drugs. It's 2 fucking words. Also, interestingly, the FDA doesn't actually oversee the safety of all food in the US. It oversees around 80% of it, but the remaining 20% largely falls under the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service. And the division of responsibilities can get maddeningly complicated. While broadly, the USDA oversees beef, poultry, and some egg products, and the FDA oversees the rest, in practice, where the exact lines get drawn can get ridiculous.
Take a look at this. Beef broth made in a plant regulated by the USDA, which inspects every day. But chicken broth made in a plant regulated by the FDA, which is inspected once every 5 years. In the frozen food aisle, cheese pizza is regulated by the FDA. Pepperoni pizza? Well, that's the USDA. The fish? Well, that's FDA. Except one, catfish, that's USDA.
Yeah, it's pretty confusing. It can be very difficult to guess which agency oversees which kinds of food. For example, eggs in their shells, FDA. Eggs processed into egg products, USDA. The feed that egg-laying hens eat, FDA again. Open-faced meat sandwich, USDA. But closed-faced meat sandwich, that's FDA. And as you know, if you make a half-cheese, half-pepperoni pizza and then put an egg on top, the whole government actually explodes. And the thing is, that fractured structure can create a lot of cracks for problems to fall into. Then there are the funding issues, because despite the fact that the FDA oversees, remember, 80% of food, they and the USDA receive close to the same amount of funding for food safety oversight, meaning that the FDA essentially has to make the same budget go 4 times as far. On top of that, the FDA's job is actually much more complex, because while the USDA's work is concentrated in large meat processing plants, of which we have relatively few, around 800, the FDA's purview includes about 35,000 produce farms, 300,000 restaurant chain establishments, 10,500 vending machine operators, and roughly 275,000 food processing facilities, more than half of which are overseas. Very basically, the FDA is spread extremely thin and the USDA isn't. And this discrepancy actually helps explain a shocking fact that came to light after that baby formula incident last year regarding the size of the FDA team that is tasked with overseeing those particular factories.
There's a total of 9 people who are focused on infant formula at the FDA in the budget. We got an additional 4 people allocated last year, but we're going to need more than that.
That's true. The entire department overseeing infant formula was just 9 people. That is just not enough. For context, this show has 4 interns, and we need all of them. but the stakes of their jobs are just not nearly as high. Their only life or death duty is making sure that Mr. Nutterbutter never gets out of his cage. Oh shit! Oh shit! Everybody stay incredibly still. So clearly, some of the FDA's issues come from without in how it's structured and funded, but some of its problems come from within, like the fact that even by government standards, it has an infamously slow bureaucracy. Take, for instance, this very specific announcement that they made at the end of 2020.
A shakeup for French dressing fans. The Food and Drug Administration is proposing removing ingredient requirements for the salad dressing at the request of the Association for Dressings and Sauces. Right now, dressing must include vinegar, oil, and lemon or lime in order to be called French.
Now, I know that was about an FDA ruling, but the only thing that I'm thinking about after watching that clip is the Association for Dressings and Sauces. I now want to know everything about them. I'm guessing ranch and barbecue sauce are the heavyweights there, mayo too, obviously, and then there's probably turmoil over the hot young newcomers, truffle ketchup, green goddess dressing, all the flashy stuff, I get it. But who do you think the black sheep of the organisation are? Worcestershire? Maybe some of the more fucked up mustards? This is the only thing I'm interested in talking about now. Just know, anytime I'm talking about something else, 90% of my brain is still focused on the Association for Dressings and Sauces. But the point of showing you that clip is that the FDA made that announcement at the end of 2020, after my new favourite trade group asked them to do something about the definition of French dressing back in, and this is true, 1998. And when they announced the decision, they didn't even explain why it took them more than 2 decades, spanning one 9/11 and the dissolution of the Spice Girls, to arrive at that decision. But all of this dysfunction has real consequences, because it's not just baby formula or honey smacks that can cause illness. One of the biggest vulnerabilities in our current system actually has to do with leafy greens. They are overseen by the FDA and are a major source of food contamination. And one of the key reasons for that is that large industrial farms have become more common, with livestock raised extremely close to where crops are being grown, and sometimes even sharing a water source. And that, as this expert explains, can be a real issue.
How we raise animals can fuel the growth of these bugs. So if we crowd the animals together and you have one that's carrying a really bad pathogen like E. coli 157, then they can poop those bacteria out, and then the shit from the cattle washes off into the streams or into canals, irrigation canals, and then those can be used to water these plants. You have this distribution system for these pathogens from animals to produce.
Now, there are a lot of excellent production choices in that documentary, including deciding to both cinematically shoot a cow shitting and allow someone to say the word shit. I support that choice. You can keep your little pleasantries like feces and manure, but it's cow shit. Call it what it is. We know it when we see it, if not always when we eat it. But the point is, that shit can go from the animals into water, which is then sprayed directly onto the lettuce. And given the growth in boxed and bagged salads, just one head of contaminated lettuce can get spread out across a lot of people. And while with meat, you can kill off a lot of the pathogens simply through the act of cooking it, with produce like leafy greens, your options are significantly more limited.
Rinsing fruits and vegetables is always a good idea, but health experts say E. coli isn't easily washed away.
I had a professor who used to say, you can't sterilize lettuce with a blowtorch.
Wow, that is a striking thing for your professor to have said to you, although, to be fair, it's technically not true, because you obviously can sterilise lettuce with a blowtorch, and the reason I know that is, just watch me. See, I'm not saying this is a good idea, or that it tastes good afterwards, I'm just saying you clearly can sterilise lettuce with a blowtorch, OK? Facts matter. And all of this would make you hope that our produce is as thoroughly inspected as our beef, but the opposite is the case. Because while there are over 7,000 workers overseeing beef for the USDA, there are only 614 FDA field investigators responsible for leafy greens. And I would say that this is a disaster waiting to happen, except it already has happened, and repeatedly. In 2018, an E. coli outbreak in leafy greens sickened 240 people and killed 5 across 36 states. Later that same fall, a different E. coli outbreak hit, again in leafy greens, But the FDA was so tied up dealing with the first one that an FDA executive wrote to his colleagues, "I have no resources to deploy." And it's a little disconcerting that messages from a modern public health department sound a lot like missives from the Civil War. And as this food safety expert explains, all of that leads to a truly striking truth.
When you eat a hamburger, the most dangerous part of that is not the burger. It's going to be the onion, lettuce, and tomatoes.
That's not great to hear, is it? Partly because I don't want to live in a world where lettuce, onion and tomatoes are dangerous, but also because I don't want to live in a world where going to Panera is edgy. Panera is, and should always be, a milquetoast suburban destination where women in their 50s gossip, girls in their teens gossip, and one very old man eats a bagel over the course of 3 hours. Panera should not be edgy, but as the FDA seems to have turned a Greek salad into a loaded gun, I guess it fucking is now. So by this point, it should be clear a massive overhaul is needed here. And you should know, overhauls in food safety can happen. It happened to the USDA 30 years ago, after undercooked hamburgers at Jack in the Box restaurants led to one of the worst E. coli outbreaks in US history. 4 children died during that. Something that, just as a side note, Jack in the Box executives at the time could have handled with a little more tact.
The company's president says Jack in the Box will pay all medical expenses for those who got sick, and he urged customers to come back to avert another blow to the company.
And that second tragedy would be a loss of jobs.
That is a shitty response. Also, how is it the customer's responsibility to keep your employees from losing their jobs? If we accidentally killed 4 people during one of our multiple stupid explosions, I wouldn't be begging you to keep watching our show. I'd be getting sent to prison. Except, I'm just kidding. Rich white celebrities don't go to prison. Felicity Huffman took one for the whole team, so now we're square. The point is, after Jack in the Box, there was a public outcry prompting a major overhaul to the USDA. And the thing is, the FDA almost had a similar moment back in the late aughts. There were a series of horrific outbreaks in peanut butter, spinach, and other foods. And in response, Congress passed the Food Safety Modernization Act, which gave the FDA sweeping new powers to regulate food. And at the time, everyone thought this was a pretty big deal.
Today, President Obama signs a bill for the first major overhaul of the U.S. food safety system in almost a century.
It will give the Food and Drug Administration new powers to force mandatory recalls when foodborne illness or other hazards are found in the U.S. food supply.
If this law is a huge success, a lot of that success is going to be invisible. You are not going to be seeing as many people sick.
Yeah, it sounded great, except if all of that had actually happened, I wouldn't be doing this story right now, would I? We'd be back to our regularly scheduled programming of hamster loneliness or, I don't know, fucking trout gout. Spoiler alert, it's more common than you think, and Congress refuses to act. There were just 2 small problems, though, with the Food Safety Modernization Act. First, we didn't fund the FDA to do all the new things that we just asked it to do. And second, the agency was still hamstrung by its glacial bureaucracy. For instance, the law mandated that the FDA come up with a standard for water being used in agriculture. Basically, a way to keep your salad from getting lightly misted with microscopic cow shit. The problem is, it's 12 years later, and it still hasn't produced a final rule. They did, in December 2021, unveil a proposed rule, but it had some major problems, including the fact that it didn't mandate any testing. Instead, it asked producer growers to identify and address their own potential hazards, which is clearly less of a water standard and more of a self-graded water quiz. And while it would be great if businesses could be trusted to keep themselves in check, that's not generally how things go. For a good example of this, look at literally any business. And look, some people might argue that the FDA simply needs to be funded better and that its lines of authority need to be clearer. And to be fair, there has been some recent progress there. Just last month, they established a new role at the agency so one person could be in charge of the FDA's entire food safety program. It's a bit incredible that that role didn't exist until just now, but still, I will take it. The problem is, though, history strongly suggests that it won't be nearly enough. A much bolder plan would be to actually break the FDA up completely and in doing so create a new agency solely devoted to food. Now, that's a big move and one likely to face significant resistance, and it would need to be done very carefully, but I would argue it might be worth it. So many experts we talked to for this story said that if we were to build a food safety system from scratch, it'd look nothing like the fractured system that we have today. And the fact is, under the system that we have right now, future outbreaks aren't just possible, they're absolutely inevitable. And I, for one, do not want to live in a world where the only 100% safe way to prepare a very, very basic salad is this.